So we're going to fly through a lot of information real quick, but the most important piece is really the levy information I'll get to towards the end. And we will provide this out to your peers that aren't able to be here on video, as well as the Prezi link, and any other resources you can drive off the website on FAQs. There's some buttons there that you can learn information to. Obviously, and I'm not going to cover this, you know it, it's a great system. You're working in a place that people want to be when it comes to sending your students to Liberty Schools. Rich history, high performing. What we do know though is we're not perfect and we have room for improvement. And that's the message that I've been talking about for the last 12 months basically, is how do we get better? Because when we compare ourselves to outside the state averages, we have room for improvement when we compare ourselves to peers and the top districts in the state of Missouri. While we're very high performing, there's room for improvement. This set of peer districts is the same set you saw last year. It's updated with new data, the 2013 data set. To be honest, we're going to expand that peer group and take it into a group of 15 districts, 7 on each side of the state, plus ourselves. And that data will be coming out soon. The board has seen it and we'll be pushing it out to you soon. But this is what Liberty looks like versus the data set that I showed you last year with data. Again, the reason we compare ourselves to peers is because our student demographics don't look like the state of Missouri. This is a demographic set. Our enrollments with these peers, we're all big districts, somewhere between 3,500 and 22,000. Those are all probably top 50 size-wise in the state of Missouri. But what I would say is demographics-wise, we are not like the state of Missouri. We have 21.1% free and reduced. That's incredibly low. The state average would bounce well over 50%. If you just looked at the high-performing districts, according to the state's last accreditation with distinction list, that list would have more than 38% free and reduced students in the high-performing districts. So we're incredibly advantaged when it comes to the student body and the kids that come our way when it comes to support economically from home. Our other demographics are about like the rest, pretty homogeneous population, and that provides for some easier ways to educate. It also provides for some lack of advantage, to be honest, of getting a mix of different cultures and different diversities, but so we've got to find ways to make sure our kids get those experiences somehow else. Come on in, you're fun. So that's a demographic set. So how did we do this year? Last year I showed you some of this data. When we compared to ourselves to the state, on 19 exams that we can get pure comparisons on, all 19 were above state average. That's all of our math and EOC tests, so every one of those were above state average. And I would say we should be, obviously, when you look at student demographics. The bad news is when we compare to our peers, room for improvement. On those same 19 tests, when we look at our peer average, so those other 8 districts, and the average of those other 8 districts, we're below that average on 16 of those exams, above on 3, below on 16. So room for improvement. Now, are we light years below? No, we're not. We're still in the range, but we have room to grow. We want our kids to be able to compete for scholarships, for jobs, and a 10th of a point here and a 10th of a point there are not an issue. But when you're below on 16 out of 19, there's a little bit of a trend. I mean, that's not the middle mark. That's a trend of being below. Obviously, we know one of the other things that we're significantly different is we're testing all of our kids on ACT, and I think it's a great move. It gives us more data, it gives us more opportunities to identify how we help kids be prepared. So when they leave here, if they want to go to college, number one, remediation is not where they end up, because that's not what we want, that's not what parents want. So how do we make sure that they're ready? And number two, they have options. Because if we're not giving them ACT and not making sure that they know that that's an option, they often won't choose that as an option. So they have options when they leave here. Graduation rate, this is probably one of my big concerns. You heard me say it last year when we looked at our peer average. The good news is our averages went up 3 straight years. So we are trending in the right direction. We are getting more kids across the stage. We broke over 90% this year, almost 91. The peer average, however, is over 93, close to 94. So how do we continue to get more kids across the stage? We want kids to get across that starting line because we know that that is the basis for economic stability. Without a diploma, the futures are difficult for most of our students that don't get there. And remember, at 91%, that's still 1 out of every 10 that freshmen that walk into this school that don't walk out with a diploma. And that's a lot of kids if you think of 1 out of every 10 that walk into your freshman classes right now. So, how do we do overall against the entire state? What this does is it gives us an index score of all the 19 exams put into one, and this again shows you of the districts that have 1,000 or more kids, There are 193 of those in the state of Missouri, and out of those 193, if we combined all those scores, we'd be 20th. So once again, high performing, nearly in the top 10%. However, when we look at our peers, we're 8 out of the 9. Okay, so we beat Lee Summit, but fall slightly behind Kearney, somewhat significantly behind Blue Springs, and quite significantly behind 3 or 4 of the other peers that make their way into the top 5%. And there's no reason. We have similar student demographics, similar opportunities for our kids that we can't be competing in that top 5%. So the good news is when we look at our peers, we're looking at the best districts in the state of Missouri, which is exactly who we want our kids to be competing with and who we want to be benchmarking against. So what's our financial reality, and has it changed since last year? Not a lot. What we know is we have a $130 million budget total. Of that, it's a people business. You can see the big chunk of the pie. That is the human side of our business. $93 million, and if you take out these two pieces, the debt service, which is paying off the buildings we have, and lease, which is paying off some of the additional buildings we have, the operating side of the budget, that chunk makes up 81% of the operating budget. So 4 out of every $5 that we spend in operations pays for a person, whether that be a custodian, a bus driver, a cook, a teacher, an administrator. 4 out of every $5 goes to salary and benefits of people. So it's a people business, 1,500 employees. We also have a small materials and supplies and purchase services budget. Important to know though, if you just cut off buying stuff, it really doesn't save us much because you still got to pay the light bill, still got to pay the water bill, still got to put gas in the buses and food on the tables, and that's a big chunk of those budgets. So materials and supplies, while it seems like a big number, there's not a lot of flex in those dollars because of some of the things that are just required to do business. We're trying to save everything we can in that area. So that's the 2013-2014 budget. How do we compare to our peers when it comes to spending? I showed you this last year, but the best way to look at it is how much do we spend per kid. So $9,284 a kid is what we spent last year. That ranks right in the middle of those 9, 4 above, 4 below. The peers closest to us are near us. The St. Louis side, there's a couple outliers, Ladue, Parkway, that's been significantly more, but they have a tax base that's significantly more. Those that are near us spend similar to us, so they're not outspending or overspending. What I would tell you is this is the thing that I pointed to last year, and it continues to be the trend in our struggle when it comes to our levy, is we have a $861 million assessed valuation. That's all the property wealth in the system. That's every house, every car, every business, all added up together. That's how much worth there is in this system. That's only, well, it's a lot of money, right? It's only $76,000 of assessed valuation per child. And if you look at our peers, once again, we're last. Okay, so that means that we don't have as big a tax base behind every child in our system, which means that we have to have a higher levy in order to generate the dollars that other districts do. So what's that look like? The levy, once again for us, is a total of 609. It's the second highest on this list. Lee Summit edges us out by a penny this year at 610. The bad news is for that levy, however, we only generate $4,652 a child. So, and if you look at that number, it's the second lowest, and the only one that's lower is Kearney, and their levy is 90 cents less, a 521 levy, so they're the only one generating less. Those that are around us, Blue Springs has a 572 levy, so 30 cents plus less, generates $300 more. If you look at Lee Summit, they have 1 penny more, but if you look at how much they generate per child, it's $1,000 more per child locally. Park Hill, who we always get some comparisons to, has a 541 levy, so their patrons are paying 70 cents less on their levy, but they're generating nearly $3,000 more per child. That's a competitive advantage that puts us at a significant disadvantage when it comes to what our patrons can afford and what we can provide. The solution, right, is a state formula that's fully funded, that's supposed to help equalize. And that's what the foundation formula is. The bad news is when the state can't generate enough revenue or doesn't obligate enough revenue, and that's a different argument, if that revenue is not there, then we get shortchanged. Okay, so $3.7 million right now that is supposed to be coming to Liberty Public Schools as part of that formula to equalize is not, because the state is underfunding the formula by 7%. That's $328 a kid in our system. That's a lot of money if you think about across this system. When you compare ourselves to our peers next to us, Blue Springs, Well, it's $3.5 million, they have a lot more kids, so it's only $253 a kid. When you look at Park Hill, $1.9 million, they're still being shortchanged by the state, but it's only $186 a kid. So it's kind of the double whammy scenario where you can't generate a lot locally because you don't have a high assessed valuation, and the state's supposed to help out, but when the state helps out and they're short funding, it hurts those that can't generate local money worse than it hurts anybody else. Those are that they're supposed to be helped. So that's where equity in a reduction is not necessarily the best thing in this scenario. So it puts us at a disadvantage, and it makes us have to put a significant pressure on our local patrons to pick up the tab if they want to continue to compete with some of the things that are in districts near us and have some of the same materials and opportunities for kids. Another thing that causes us challenges, obviously, is our growth. While it's great to be a growing district, growing at a rapid rate causes more pressure and it causes more funds to have to be directed to debt service in order to pay off facilities, in order to house the kids that are coming our way. We're right at 11,600 this year, 11,600 kids. Obviously, you know we're over capacity. You're the shining example with 11 beautiful learning cottages outside, and I hope you're teaching and doing great in those. But we know that's not a permanent solution to the future, especially as this system continues to grow. We're going to grow by another 2,500 kids by 2021, busting well over 14,000. We already have 40 mobile classrooms in the system. We have to come up with facility plans that don't say that our solution is multiplying that 40 into 150 in order to deal with the 2,500 that are coming our way. It's not a permanent solution to the challenges that come our way. So that's our growth projection. The real issue in that is it's far more than a facility growth issue. Obviously, when you build facilities or when you put students in facilities, you have to have what? People, right? Operations. 4 out of every $5 are operations. I told you this last year, and the number hasn't changed, even though, and it's probably changed a little bit because we drew down in size, so it's probably a little under $3 this year. But if we wanted to buy the current structure financially for the 2,500 kids that are coming our way at the current staffing ratios, cook, custodian, bus driver, teacher, administrator, current ratios, out of those 2,500 came our way, we would have to increase our local levy by $3 in order to generate enough funds to create the system we have in 2020. That's unrealistic. That is not achievable. Also, if we were going to create the same amount of square footage per child that we have in the system, it would cost us nearly $100 million in new buildings to create the same square footage per child as we grow by 2,500 kids. That is also unrealistic because those two things coupled together is a $3.15, $3.30 levy increase on top of the $6.09 right now. No voter is ever going to go for that. We will have a hard enough time just having a conversation about 36 cents, not 10 times that, okay? So the reality is we have to continue to do our work differently and think how we can be very effective and efficient within the dollars that are provided us and not push too much on our local patrons while continuing to have a conversation at the state level about how do we get revenue generated back here. So what do we do different? Well, some things that we can't do different, we have to continue to do the same. Number one is take care of students. Real world application, ready for college, ready for career is what we want for our kids. So we have to continue to provide great experiences for kids. Number two, we can't do that without good people. Now, if we choose to not attract, develop, and retain high-quality teachers, high-quality support staff, high-quality leadership, this system will fail. It will go down significantly. We know that. So choosing to freeze the schedule permanently, choosing to just cut the system to the bone would have an effect, negative impact on our kids in the future. So we have to continue to attract, develop, and retain high-quality people. We've got to invest in new practices. We have to change how we spend. You're sitting in one of the prime examples of that, taking a technology budget and flipping it on its head and going from a lab scenario to a one-to-one mobile device scenario is an example of changing how you spend. And it changes how you use space, it changes how we have the ability to use time, it certainly changes how we have the ability to instruct kids and flex time outside the school day. So that is an example of how we have to invest into technologies to help us think differently about how we deal with our per pupil expenditure growth. And then the last thing, obviously, is how do we use space differently? How do we use the space we have more efficiently throughout the entire system, K through 12, administratively, and how do we add new space? We can't add it at the same way that we are at the same level that we've done it before. Every time 600 show up, build an elementary. Every time 8 or 9 show up, build a middle school. When we bust over 1,500 to 2,000, build a high school. That is the $100 million buy. that is unaffordable for this system. So we have to think differently about how our facility structure plays out in the future. So Liberty Leads obviously is a prime example of that, and you don't need me to lecture. You are the work trying to discover how do we use technology to help serve our kids differently, both now and in the future. And it's a work in progress. It won't happen tomorrow, but you have to get started at some point. And it is the future of education. We know higher ed, we know the workforce, webinars, opportunities to do blended learning are part of the environment, and we have to help our kids be prepared for that. Now, it's not fully online, it's not that the school's going to disappear, but how do we blend and how do we use time different? And I know a lot of you are having those conversations. So, what did the board do? A facility master planning process, and it really drives right to the levy at this point and the conversation about what does the facility plan look like. They did a lot of things. They got information from a lot of different ways. They hired an outside consultant to come in and review this. This actually happened prior to me even showing up last year. We've started over at least twice on the project. The good news is really that they took the information and the feedback from the 2011 issue. They took information and feedback from the community stakeholders in different surveys and talking to people throughout the system and created a new plan. The new plan looks different. Number one, it says first thing we have to do is maximize the use of all space. That is your number one asset. We have 2.5 million square feet in this system. How do we think differently about the space that we have? It already exists. It costs us nothing to reuse it. So how do we use our space different? Number two, as we build, like I talked about, we build with a different vision of reducing square footage per learner instead of just building at the same rate. And then number three, and this is where Liberty Leads and all of the other things that we're doing right now to investigate time and space, research, implement new instructional learning and scheduling practices that allow us to use that space and time more efficiently, and drive back to number one and number two. So the facility master plan is built on those three tenets. This is fine print that you can obviously not see from your table, but if you want to, you're welcome to drive to the board docs and you'll see it, how it's developed over the last few months. What it has, the three goals I just mentioned, are in the top right corner. It's a long-range plan that takes us out past 2020, and it has two phases, and it has a supplemental private funding project scenario. So phase one, which I will tell you what's in just a minute if you're unfamiliar with it, happens now. That's part of the 36-cent levy question that is on the ballot right now. Phase two would play out in approximately 2017 to 2019, depending on enrollment growth and depending on the finances. And then it has additional facility acquisitions and additions at that point. And then there's other things that we see as needs as we compare ourselves to other districts. This is not about keeping ourselves up with the Joneses, because it doesn't even get us everything that every other district has around here, like a state, like a district stadium, like turf on the fields, like some of those other things. But we can't afford to ask our voters to pay for it, so we will attack those through private fundraising efforts. So at the bottom, you'll see a private fundraising line of things that we still think are needs, but we're not going to put them on the levy question at this point. So that's what's in the facility master plan. Step one is the 36-cent question. What I would tell you, very positive, is the board voted unanimously on August 19th to support this issue. And said that this is the right plan at the right time for Liberty Public Schools, and that's a great step forward to have 7 that are committed to the plan that we have in place. Number two, what's in it? Well, before we get there, let's review. Why now? Why is it important to do it now? Number one, the state is underfunding us significantly. Over $4 million by the time you put the formula and transportation reductions, well over $4 million a year. If the state was funding us, we would not be asking for a penny. We could run this system on the money that they would send us if they were fully funding the formula. So this is about helping us fill the gap that is left right now. Obviously, you know, the student population piece, once again, over 1,000, we got 1,000 kids in mobiles right now, and we've got 14,000 going to be here in the next 7 to 8 years, so we're growing rapidly. And the last thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but is a significant why now factor, is our district assessed valuation. That $861 million that I talked to you about earlier, of all the wealth in this system and all the property value. The bad news is, since 2008, we've grown by 1,000 kids, and we haven't got a dime in new money, okay? Because assessed valuation is flat, it's actually dropped. It's lower today than it was in 2008. That means property values, because of the recession, because of the economic condition, dropped, which means that while new kids came, we got no new money. The only new money that we've been getting are from enrollment growth, and that's our state share, which is half of what it costs to educate a kid in Liberty Public Schools. So no new money coming in as part of that growth of 1,000 kids in assessed valuation. So what's in the plan? It looks different because it's not new buildings, it's additions. It's much more efficient, and it's what we have to do to make sure that we drive all of our available funds into construction. So those that have currently modulars, Shoal Creek, Lewis and Clark would have them next year if we don't do anything. Kellybrook and Warren Hills will all get additions. Classroom space at Liberty Middle School, this one's on the border. It'll depend, to be honest, on how bids come in if it passes. It's a need. It's the only middle school that needs space between now and phase 2. But it's about 4 classrooms, and it's going to be bid as an alternate. We hope that we can afford it, but bottom line, it'll depend on how bids come in. Classroom space, science labs, and track at Liberty North. Those are the top needs at this site after talking to Dr. Jacobs and other staff members out here. So this would get 1 wing. Wouldn't get 2 wings like the 2011 project, but we'll get 1 wing now, and we'll come back and get the other wing on phase 2. So this will get a significant number of classrooms. What else is in the plan? Additional elementary classroom space by this is a perfect example of taking space we have and rethinking, taking the current district office and moving it into Blue Jay Tower, where we have 2 floors that have been rented by Northwest but have sat vacant from district use. We can use that for office space. We're also moved the academy out of the first floor and relocate it into an alternative location. That would allow us to free up the entire district office to put it in an elementary site. At very little cost. That could house 300 to 400 kids as we think about how we continue to grow. That's the most efficient way that we can get space. It would not require boundary changes. It would be a voluntary-based system of enrollment, and that's played out in many other systems very effectively. So we would get space that way. We would also provide space at Liberty High. As you know, one of the challenges as freshmen coming into both high schools is that all those PE credits that they used to get at their junior highs now have to be taken at their high school sites. So we do not have enough fitness, wellness, competition space for all of our programming that happens at the high school level. So this is another gym. It's not the size of the field house of Liberty North, to be honest. It would be a competition gym, but it would seat approximately what they have, maybe just a couple hundred more, but we think we can get 4 to 5 classroom spaces out of it by designing it a little different. So our goal is to get 4 to 5 classroom spaces and give that second competition space just like what exists at this site. Provide technology upgrades and enhancements for K-8. Obviously, as we think about using space differently at K-8, we are going to continue to put devices in the hands of kids. Is it going to be a one-to-one program K-8? It does not create enough money to go one-to-one K-8. It creates enough money to invest into new initiatives that would be investigated through pilot programs to decide how do we best use technology at the middle level and how do we best use it at the elementary level, but it would designate funds that could be used in those locations. It also has safety and security upgrades to any buildings that we touch along the way. Basically, if we're on that site doing an upgrade of some sort, we would create the secure vestibules that we have on all of our newest sites like you have here at Liberty North. So some safety and security upgrades across the district. How's it different than the 2011? There's a lot of different ways, but a few highlights. Obviously, it's less. Okay, it was 43 cents last time. This one is 36. So it's 7 cents less. The overall projected cost to build out at the rate that would have been built out based on the 2011 project would have been that $95 million. This takes that down by 37% over the projected between now and 2020. So it really reduces the overall projected construction costs. We can drive money to instruction. And it removes the district stadium component. Once again, we know it's a need, but as for the priority level, it has dropped at this point. So it puts that on a private funding opportunity for the district to go after. How else? And obviously, you hear me say it over and over again, but it really says the future is saving operational costs for instruction and not building it into facilities. So by being more conservative in how we do our facilities, we are able to really drive at holding our monies for our staff and for the instructional materials and supplies our kids need. It's a phase-in project. We get a chunk of it now, we get a chunk of it later. That allows it to do it at a little lower rate right now. It restructures the space that we have. It's going to challenge you to think differently about the space that exists in Liberty North. It will challenge us to think at Liberty High, at every middle school, at every elementary. Labs, as we know them, are continuing to evolve because technology will be used different. Hallway space will be used different. Cafeteria space will be used different. We have to conserve all of those, or use those spaces to their maximum efficiency possible in order to protect our instructional environment. And no immediate boundary changes. It really allows the feeder system that was created as part of reconfiguration to play out, which is a very good system. It allows for consistency and expectation for our kids. And we're excited about that. So this allows that system to play out and doesn't require anybody to move their kids around the system right now. So what's it cost to the taxpayer? 36 cents. Plays out that if you own a house in Liberty Public Schools that cost approximately $200,000 or was assessed at $200,000, and you have $20,000 worth of cars, boats, whatever toys you have in personal property, that $220,000 total would generate an additional tax bill of $161 a year or $13.50 a month. So that's what the 36 cents plays out to be for that taxpayer. Obviously, you can do the math. If it's down, if you have a $100,000 house, 10,000, 110, it reduces down to 80. If you multiply it up based on what you think your values are, you can do the math to what the impact would be for you. So that's the taxpayer impact. Once again, the most important thing for me is that you have clear information. You've been provided in 20 minutes a very quick scenario or synopsis of what's in the levy. How are we doing financially right now? What are the challenges of Liberty Public Schools? And then a little flyer to take with you. And we have many more of those. What I would tell you, if you know people and you want to take one of your neighbors so that they have a baseline of understanding of information, please do so. We will be doing this presentation at least probably 70, 80 times. We've already done it 25, 10 days basically. So between now and November 5th, we are trying to get the word out to everybody. Be educated voters. This is what Liberty Public Schools challenges are. This is what the realistic growth projections are, and here's a solution that we think makes sense, and then let the voters decide. And we hope that you can help provide them information and anything that we can do, once again, to drive back information to you so you can answer questions, let us know. Obviously, you've heard Dr. Jacobs, you've read the email from myself and probably Dallas sent out. When you're on the clock, you can't do anything on this, okay, other than share information, just like I've done. We cannot use any district resources to promote other than just to educate, okay? But off the clock, you can do whatever you want. That's completely up to you. So, what questions do you have for me that I can try to answer? Yeah.
I'm just curious about, like, I know that you can't really promote it necessarily, but what are some of the things that we're going to be doing between now and the vote that's coming up in the public?
The big thing the district will do is just what we're doing right now, is anybody that knows of an audience, we will be there, and we will provide these kind of informational flyers to the system. We will use quick news and those kind of things to shoot information in every way possible. On top of that, there will be a campaign committee that's already formed and is beginning to work. So I would say keep your ears to the ground. There are people that are already engaged in those things. If you want to engage, you're welcome to do that off district hours. And they'll be doing many other things outside that. But the district will be doing a lot of informational presentations, community nights, everything we possibly can just to inform voters of the opportunity for them to vote on this issue. So, great question.
Was there ever any thought given towards benchmarking as little as 2 cents, maybe even 1 cent of the levy proposal for all staff salaries? And the reason I say that is a great way to sway an election in a smaller community is if, I think you said we have 1,500 employees. If that consideration is given, there's 1,500 employees plus their spouses plus their neighbors. It almost always guarantees a slam dunk as far as winning the election. And I think that's one thing we neglected a little bit last time. There was a little bit of upheaval in the district. I'm sure there lots of stories, but you know what I mean?
Well, and my 2 cents on that would be, no, it wasn't ever brought up. Number one, we're trying to address that through our resources. And until we get our staff alignment where it needs to be, asking for more money for staff, I think would be not a wise decision, because as you compare us to our peers, we're overstaffed still. After counting 30 positions last year, we're still overstaffed per child as compared to Blue Springs and Lee Summit and Park Hill. So asking for more money for staff while you're still overstaffed as compared to your peers, I think is a risky proposition. So we need to get that taken care of. And then, if we're behind competitively, then we really have to attack that, and I think is important. So,
Well,
so I would say that would be my.
And that makes total sense to me. And I wasn't necessarily saying that, but if something was benchmarked to say, flip the scale every year, or if there was, this is gonna get us closer to at least guaranteeing a flip, is it, what's it called, when you roll it? Roll it, sorry, when you roll it. I wondered if that's kind of more what I was referring to with the existing staff members in that area.
Well, the plan, what I would tell you is the plan that's put in place plays for a roll every year. So the budgetary plan that we have put into place that has a staff number that we're shooting for, and that we're going to maintain as we grow, and has this facility plan in place, plays out a roll between now and 2020. Now, economic conditions can change, turn on a dime, and I can't guarantee you those things, but that is already built into our projection. So we didn't feel like we needed to add money to it in order to make that happen. So it's built into it.
That's great to know. Thank you.
Because that's important to me, because if we can't roll the schedule, we're going to struggle to retain those people long term, which is one of the goals. So,
Thank you. Great answer.
Yep.
Understanding that the football field, the multi-use stadium was one of the poison pills. One of the questions that keep coming to me from patrons is why would the notion of that originally it was called a field house, but the field house be on the table? It looks like there's an overreach where there's, well, I couldn't get this, so I'll try this, and now I see in the presentation here it's being called a PE facility and competition. So there are lots of ways to get, lots of types of competition. So, I mean, we held competitions in the auxiliary gym, and you're saying that it's not going to be. Can you describe maybe what that facility looks like? So that we can answer those questions as to, is this going to be a replacement for Coakley? Is this going to be an auxiliary competition site for lower levels?
We would see it being the varsity gym. Okay, so it would be a replacement for Coakley. It wouldn't be much bigger than Coakley. It's going to have a higher ceiling. And this is primary design. I mean, we haven't got to any of the details, but primarily design is around 1,500 to 1,600 seat gym, and then Coakley becomes the auxiliary. It would have the ability to have 2 gym classroom floors. It would have a walking track, hopefully above, but there wouldn't be no seating above. It's just, that's another classroom space. And then off the end of it, it would have a wellness room, so we could have some of those smaller classroom settings on one of the levels, at least. That's the primary design. And really what I would tell you is, just like this facility, 2 competition spaces make sense, and just like this facility, the number of wellness spaces that you have in order to educate the kids that are coming your way are going to be needed as this place grows out to 2,000, and Little High is going to project out to that same number. So that space is really not, and I've heard the same comments, it's really not a replacement for Liberty High Stadium. It becomes a real thinking about what is the space needed to offer the programming for the future. And it starts with our fitness and wellness programming. Our extracurriculars are auxiliary to that, and we need those spaces also, just like we do here. But it really starts with how do we get our kids in the space and offer the wellness and fitness programming that doesn't fit into the space that they have right now.
And it was determined that was a greater need than what has been an auxiliary expense at the middle school.
Yes, yeah, because at the middle level, there's not that need. There's not space needed at the middle level. I mean, there's
So there are expenditures that are going to be an auxiliary expense if we can.
Facilities expensive.
That you were putting it on hold in case.
Oh, the 4 classrooms at the middle school? Yeah, it's right there on that alternate line. Because those classrooms aren't needed today, we're functioning in them, and it really depends on how Liberty Middle grows. We think we can get them into 2 or 3 more classrooms. We can get a little more efficient in that space. So we feel like we could probably put that on hold 2 or 3 years without them being on top of each other, potentially, and see if we can fund it a different way or put it in phase 2.
And can you describe what the track facility might entail here in the short term? What's that going to be?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's just an all-weather track. I mean, it doesn't have turf on the inside. It doesn't have lights. It doesn't have bleachers. It just becomes a place to practice, basically, so that we don't have to transport our kids across the community to South Valley in order to have a track program basically at Liberty North. And it becomes an outdoor classroom, obviously, during good weather, or during warmer weather, where you can take kids outside also. So it's very basic, just a all-weather track, is what's projected out of that. Good questions? What else?
Is that gym attached to Liberty High School? So it's right on the property and attached to the existing school?
Yeah, it would sit on the edge where the parking is right now, so it would take up some of the existing parking. But then we would create some more parking. Don't tell maintenance, we might need to knock down their barn. But we will have to create more additional parking out there. So, good question. What else? And anybody else that has one-on-one, feel free, and I don't want to keep everybody large group, but